And oh, here we are. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Google Hangout kind of live chat session for Writing for Games. This is the September 2014 class of Writing for Games Online, and I'm joined, at least at the moment, people may come in late, by Kelvin and Victor. So, Kelvin, I know I kind of asked you already, but either of you have any questions about academic matters like assignments or the class in general you want to ask to begin with? Kelvin, you're good for the moment. Victor?
Yes. Nothing comes to mind. Everything's pretty clear.
Okay, cool. Well, let me go ahead and open up Twine. And when I've got that ready to go, I'll do a little screen share. And okay, that's loaded up. I'll do a screen share and kind of go through a couple of the major features, including things that people sometimes miss that can be convenient. Let's try closing that out. Okay, I'm going to try, rather than sharing my entire desktop, just sharing the Twine window. The last time I tried that with Google Hangout, just sharing a particular applications window, it didn't work properly. So guys, I'm counting on you to let me know if this doesn't work. So here we go.
Huzzah! It works.
You see it? Okay, good.
Yeah, I see Twine.
So here I have a little untitled story. Oh, there's the other. Can you see the top menu? Like right now, I'm mousing over the top menu for Twine, which is About Twine Preferences.
No.
Okay, so that's going to cause a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back, and I'm going to go to just a desktop screen share because I do want to show everyone. So there's the crazy, Windows and Windows thing. Now you can see my entire desktop, right?
Yes.
So here we have our Twine window, and here's the top menu. First, something that is very helpful if you had any comments for me on the first assignment about grammatical errors or typos. Let's go ahead and save our story, even though I haven't added anything to it yet. Just save it on the desktop as test. Now, if we want, we can export the story. So under the File menu, Export. TWI source code. TWI is what Twine is built on. If you are interested in getting to some of the more complex kind of interactions in Twine, taking a look at TWI may be helpful. But exporting a proofing copy is what I want to talk about. Exporting a proofing copy will create a real text file in RTF. So, here we go. That you can then open with Microsoft Word. And you'll see something that looks like this. Then you can, use your spell check. You'll have words that Word thinks are misspelled automatically underlined, etc. Now, there is no way to import a proofreading file like this one back into Twine. At least there's no reasonable way to do it. So a proofreading copy like that exists specifically for the purpose of helping you find your errors. You will then have to enter them into Twine passage by passage. But it's the best way to find mistakes you might have been missing if you've had problems with that. Now, Something that people do, because there's a way to do this if you create a, there's a, where is it? There's something I never do because it's bad form. There's a way to create outbound links very easily with a command. If you have a link and you just type a name into it, let's call it the in. Right now we have a broken link because there's no passage called the in. To close this, Twine will have to create that for us. That's fine. That can be a convenient shorthand for you. That's something that more recent versions of Twine do, the older versions didn't. But this syntax right here, where the name of the next passage is the text that will appear on screen. Let's go ahead and illustrate that. Right there, the in, and that's a blank passage, is weak syntax. It can lead you to get you in trouble later if you make a habit of writing your links that way, because then if you want to link back to the in by saying anything other than the in, like
Run away.
yeah,
Run away.
this, then you can go ahead and it'll create all these links for you. But really, maybe if you want to hide, you just want to link back to the in. And then you have to create a link in here that goes back to the in. And that's to say the in it. So rather than doing it that way, if you create a link with a vertical bar, people occasionally get confused there and type a capital letter I or a 1. With a vertical bar in it, now hide links directly to the in, and we don't need a hide passage. Something that people occasionally misunderstand is they think that you have to have a loop in your third assignment because the example loosely modeled on peanuts has a loop in it. You don't need a loop, but loops can be efficient ways of working in Twine by allowing you to return back to a place you were before, such as if you're, say, having a conversation. And let's rename this right here. Now, right now, this doesn't work. Why? I've got a passage here named Looking Around and a link named Looking Around. But right now, this link is broken. And it's actually asking me if I want to create a new passage named Looking Around. That's because Twine is capitalization sensitive. So looking around with capital letters and in lowercase are different, are distinct for Twine. But earlier, in terms of the idea of looping, sometimes might want to link back later in a story to an earlier passage. This is mostly useful for conversations where it's important that the player gets to choose multiple options. Technically, right here, with the link back and forth between the in and looking around, you have a loop. It's just a very tiny closed loop. If you imagine there are a whole bunch of passages in between here and end of a long day, you might go through the entire game up to this point and then be able to go back to the end. When you do things like that, however, you have to be careful because you can easily create problems with continuity where it no longer makes sense to go back to the inn and have orcs attack again when you just fought all the orcs and you went and negotiated with the orc king under the mountain and made peace between the orcs and the dwarves and everyone's happy and it's the end of a long day. Let's go back to the inn. Oh wait, the orcs are attacking. That's kind of part of the point of the kick the ball, Charlie Twine sample I gave everybody is that infinite loops like that only work if they're, for some comedy or kind of metafictional purpose, like referencing the fact that Charlie Brown always tries to kick that bloody football. Those are a few of the more common errors I see in Assignment 3. I'm going to go ahead and put this away now. Actually, let's go ahead and do a quick test play through it. So here we are at the end. What's that noise? We go outside. Fighting them and running away are undeveloped. Those are just blank. So if we hide, we go back to the inn, which unfortunately prompts us to go, what's that noise, and go back outside again. Let's stop screen sharing now. In the absence of any specific questions about Twine or about how to do things in Twine, I'm not going to further extend the tutorial. Oh, Andre, or Dre, thank you for joining us. Feel free to unmute your mic and say hi. Dre, do you have any questions? You're no longer muted, but if you said anything, I can't hear you. I'm going to switch over to the... there's also a text chat option if you either if you can't use your microphone or it's not working, you can type a message in the text chat bar and it'll show up. Well, Dre, I just completed a quick kind of overview of a few features of Twine that people sometimes ask about. One thing to remember about Twine for Assignment 3 is that Assignment 3 is branching dialogue, not branching narrative, so it's supposed to be a conversation. I want people to write a conversation between two or more characters. You can work in a little bit of action if it's highly appropriate, but, not like choreographed fight scenes or moving from one part of the country to another. So, Dre, Dre, you show up as here. It says you're not muted. I haven't been able to hear anything from you. Let me know if you have any questions, one way or another. So that's my quick tutorial for the night. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to check. I don't think we have any. Yeah, unless someone just posted, because it can take up to a minute for posts on the Google Hangout kind of watch page to show up. But unless someone just posted, I don't have any questions or comments there. So, any of you have any questions at the moment? It doesn't look like it, but I'm going to pause for a moment, stop speaking, so you can let me know if you do.
No, no real questions. How elaborate can you get with the scripting language on Twine? How elaborate can you get with Twee?
Really elaborate.
Oh.
Let me see. I think I used to have some screenshots of what some very complicated twines look like visually. You can get very complex in Twine, and there's the limits on Twee are far enough out that you really are not likely to hit them. This is unlike Inkle Writer, which I showed off last week, where you can actually do a lot in Inkle Writer, but if you want to be able to export it to a Kindle ebook format, then very complex uses of variables or large loops will not export properly. Anything that you can correctly be handled in HTML should be something you can craft in Twee.
Okay.
In theory, you can craft entirely in Twine, but you know the underlying language is going to have all limitations. May have fewer limitations. I'll just put it that way. Yeah, there are twines that are there are twines that easily take hours to play through. Though most Twine games are designed to be played in a single sitting, but you can bookmark your location in a Twine game and return to it later.
Nice. Nice.
And unless you turn it off, which can be done in the settings, actually, I'm not sure if it's entire. There are two ways Twine presents as HTML. There are two basic templates. There's Sugarcane and Jonah. The one you saw was Sugarcane, and it's the default one. There's Jonah, which displays on the same page as much as possible. Because with Jonah, it's not automatically possible to use the browser's back arrow to return to a previous page. In Jonah, you can actually toggle settings to not allow players to undo choices, but by default that's on. And Twine games, not necessarily Twine as used for branching dialogue, the way we're using it as a teaching tool in this class, but complete original games created in Twine fall generally within the category of interactive fiction. And in that genre, the overall consensus has for some time been that players should be able to undo their choices and try something else, as opposed to having to replay the entire game to see how things could go differently.
There's a Family Guy episode where Peter Griffin has a Find Your Fate book, and he's in bed with his wife, and he follows the knight into the dungeon, and he screams, and he's, "Oh, I didn't do that. I had my finger on the page. You saw it, Lois." No,
I remember when I was reading Choose Your Own Adventure and also Lone Wolf books. Lone Wolf books added a little bit of D&D mechanics to the Choose Your Own Adventure format. But when I was much younger, and I mean, I'll still dig out a Choose Your Own Adventure book. I have some. I've used them in classes where I have an actual physical classroom. But I remember wondering and fighting with myself over whether it was cheating to go back. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the mid-1980s, as long as we're talking about the Choose Your Own Adventure thing, TSR, when they were doing Dungeons & Dragons, had a number of modules that meant for one player, and some of them came with a red lens, and you would hold it over the red page, and the text would pop out under the lens, or you had a magic marker that would highlight invisible text. And neither of those really caught on. neither of those. I mean, none of that really caught on, but interesting what people have tried.
Right, and occasionally, I mean, I can think of some single-player role-playing book scenarios that were published into the 90s. But for pencil and paper role-playing, that's definitely been one of the least successful kind of subgenres or attempts. Intriguingly enough, there's actually been some new interest in game books and physical printed game books in the Choose Your Own Adventure, especially with some added system vein, in the wake of things like Twine and other interactive fiction. Oh, dang it. I'll try and track down the link and send it out to everyone with the link to the video. But there are some that have been published, kind of by small presses that actually offer really complex simulations in them where between the choices and the system, it feels more open and strategic than you would think you could get with printed pages. Again, something a little bit more like what TSR tried to do with those modules.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, a niche interest, but a kind of revived niche interest.
How will pasty face guys ever learn any social skills, though? I mean, it was all I had as a kid was D&D on the weekends. That was my entire social life. I mean, and now I mean World of Warcraft. Well, as Felicia Day said, MMOs. Yeah, at least you get to hear the people you're playing with. It's good enough for the blind. So we should. I I don't know. MMOs are just. Honestly, well, one of the things this class has done has gotten me thinking about the difference between MMOs and tabletop RPGs, and I mean, I'm ready to just pack all of the stuff in a box and mail it back to Blizzard, and, and I'm sorry I fell for your lie, your clever ploy, but no, this has really brought out my tabletop role-playing
Well,
passion.
and here's the thing. You can role play in an MMO, but I think that part of what tabletop gaming can do is when you have a live full-time game world and system administrator, your game master, your dungeon master, your storyteller, you can create a very different environment than the really computationally determined world of any MMO. And though I do not have a live role-playing session right now, there's also something about that face-to-face format. And there are people who do role-playing over basically relatively role-play focused, relatively free-form role-playing over chat forums and such. RPG Crossing is a website that did some crowdfunding not long ago to help support themselves as a free locus where people can come and play any game they want with other like-minded people. But again, if you're going to do that, where everyone's just posting as they can, you have to have a certain amount of trust in the other players because you also have to push the system way to the background, or you'll spend 3 years trying to complete one combat. Yeah. I go ahead.
No, just the complete 3 years for one combat. Yeah, I just thinking, my gosh, the tables junkies. back in the day, the guys who there was a table for everything. I mean, oh Lord, no, that just got me thinking. You have to push the system to the back, or else, yeah. Well, the swing of someone's axe takes 5 hours of real time. 5 seconds in game, 5 hours in real time.
Yeah, I was in my fair share of D&D and other games where things were coming along really great, and then basically something like a random encounter, not even like a plot-centric battle, would take multiple play sessions, and afterwards everyone's like, so what were we doing again? We're on a quest, right? Or were we coming back from a quest? Do we just need food? Were we looking for a place to spend the night? Yeah. Uh, that's 'cause I know that in a comment directly to you, I said something about context in which minimal system is desirable. I think one of the best things about computer games is that they make system of almost any degree of complexity something that can be automated and handled digitally in fractions of a second. But they also tend, in doing so, to place a lot more emphasis on optimal handlings of the system and can take a lot of attention away from the more interactive and even and even the creative aspects of playing a game. Not all games, but you know, I don't know exactly how creative you can get with tic-tac-toe, short of just throwing the rules over and drawing smiley faces. But I will say that MMOs are a genre of game that I only keep up with certain elements of the news on. I just do not play at this point because they are huge investments of time, and I don't have that much time. It doesn't make them bad games. It's just my own priorities lie elsewhere.
I understand. Yeah, they will eat your life. They really will.
So, let's see. Is there something? I think that's actually part of the appeal of interactive fiction and game book kind of games is well, it was who was it? Was it Porpentine and Anthropy? One of the people who's really into Twine put it this way about Twine games in that game book style with fixed specific choices, as opposed to the open text parser, command prompt like text games that were the text adventures of early computer gaming, and many. There's also a thriving community of
Lux and Zorkin.
right. I don't completely agree with the following quote, but I find it interesting that the author said something like, Twine games deal in real restrictions, whereas open command prompt games deal in a illusion of freedom. And for all that I have a lot of respect for those games, I spent enough time both with text adventures and with games that were graphical adventure games that still used a command prompt, like some of the early Lucas and Sierra games, trying to figure out the right phrase to say the thing that I knew I wanted to do, that I really can appreciate that frustration. It's, so can I not use the key in the lock? Or is it that I'm not using the right phrase to say that I should unlock the door with the key?
Put key in lock, turn key. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
But yeah, I think it's interesting to see the multiple tracks that games and game narratives have followed. In addition to being useful for thinking about branching dialogue, which again is one of the major areas in which big companies' video games need writers, is for the dialogues. branching narrative is one of the most story-centric and writing-centric modes of game creation out there. And which isn't to say that writing isn't really central in games, including games that sometimes have no text in them. I think you've all, earlier in the program, watched that the video from the trying to remember the name of it. There's come on, I know this. Is it Extra Credits? Is that right? There's a series of kind of under the hood video game design videos that are conveyed with this kind of crude, simple animation, but very thoughtful. And one of them takes Journey, a game without words, a game that was intentionally designed to incorporate players from all over the world into a semi-shared online environment. Definitely not an MMO. But there are players playing Journey, and those players are visible to other players playing Journey at the same time. Journey, again, is wordless, but it uses plot design and story crafting. And the creators of this video make a very coherent argument that Journey is modeled on the hero's journey, Campbell's hero's journey itself, because it hits all of Campbell's plot points really neatly, including things like the entry into the underworld as one of Campbell's terms for one of the points in the hero's journey. You go underground. At the very beginning of Journey, you're presented with a wide open desert you seem to be able to explore, but you can refuse the call, and if you go too far, you get blown back onto course. Some people might make arguments that that's because Campbell's model is universal, but I don't think so. I think that Campbell's model is a useful way of mapping out a plot that captures a number of common threads in Western storytelling that can be occasionally found elsewhere. Campbell said that his monomyth applied to all stories everywhere, and modern folklorists and mythologists just reject that idea entirely because Campbell basically cherry-picked examples that suited his model. But from much of the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, through Greco-Roman, through modern European to present day storytelling cycles, you can see the beats of, the stages of Campbell's hero's journey, because many of those ideas have continued to have great power, and because the way Campbell phrased them is broad enough and open enough, you can include a whole lot of things under that umbrella. With any model whatsoever, I would suggest to you that it is always a necessary element that any model is incomplete at representing the reality of the world or of human endeavor in any creative field, at least, and that the more precise and specific the model, the more obvious the gaps are, but the more loose and indefinite the model is, the less useful it is for practical tasks like putting a story together. I think you can see that in some of the different models of storytelling that we have in this program, from the hero's journey to Sid Field's kind of pretty open and loose 3-act structure, to Blake Snyder's very specific beat sheet, which tells you at about what page, or depending on how strictly you interpret it, exactly what page in a screenplay each major part of a plot should happen. That's my little tangent for the evening.
Good tangent.
I do this. It comes of, I don't know, neurochemicals, transmitters. I got a weird brain. It wanders off. It does things. Sometimes it tells me what it's doing. Sometimes it doesn't. It really should have tentacles. It just wants to go.
one of the things I've been wondering about Campbell's model is, apart from the Orphic myth, I don't really ever see the meeting with the goddess in the cave occurring in other mythologies. And then after Orpheus deals with the goddess in the cave, it's sort of over for him until he
Right.
gets with the part. And I kind of look at that, and it's sort of like, well, it becomes obvious this is sort of cobbled together in a way.
I'm not the right person to come to for a defense of what Campbell is doing. There are other people who can give you all these different examples, and my gut reaction, thank you, Victor. My gut reaction is similar to yours. I feel like Campbell was a clever man and a good speaker, and he saw certain tropes repeated, and he thought that that was significant. But when you look at his own model, you see how certain things have been de-emphasized. Like, it's in Campbell, there's the woman as temptress, is actually the way Campbell often put it. That's been kind of elided to the point of like, well, there's something feminine that the hero needs to encounter at some point. Well, okay, right around this stage, but it's more of a completion of the character. Why? Why have we changed that? Well, you might argue that it's because uh, Campbell's own terms oversimplified or misdirected us, or it might be simply because today, as a whole, as a society, we're less sexist than Campbell was when Campbell himself and his contemporaries were at that time. There's a huge tradition of stories in which everything is going well for a male protagonist until some woman offers him something. But we're not as interested in retelling stories uh, of males being defeated because women are, well, most often just because a woman is sexual, and in those stories, whether it's Circe in the Odyssey or Eve in the Garden of Eden, depending on how that particular story is told or retold. Certainly, for example, in Milton's version of Paradise Lost, it's a seduction. Not so in all the various Christian and Jewish, especially once you get into the Midrash explaining things, retellings and interpretations of the story. Long-winded answer, I know.
No, I mean, at the risk of beginning an angry mob with pitchforks and torches, we could also begin by noting that anything Campbell does or says, any theory he develops, would immediately be culture bound, and therefore
Yes.
is not truly free of the constraints of his culture. So it works well for us because we're in the West. It might not work so well everywhere else.
Well, and I very much agree with that statement, actually. I think it is possible to, in an informed way, try to not be limited by one's, or not too limited by one's acculturation and existing knowledge, but that requires a certain kind of open looking at new knowledge. One theoretical way I've heard Campbell talked about is that there was this period of time, certainly through the middle of the 20th century, and at least in the United States, in the aftermath of World War II, things started to systems of thought started to shift more quickly in war-ravaged Europe than in the United States. That was about developing big, all-encompassing theories. The theory of everything. The unified field theory in the sciences that is one of the reasons Einstein rejected quantum mechanics. I mean, Einstein wanted there to be a unified field theory. No one's developed one yet successfully. In the humanities, theories that ranged from the socio-political, such as specifically classic Marxist theory, to the kind of structuralist approaches to literature and storytelling, of which Campbell can be seen as as perhaps the last really widely popular structuralist theorist. He's like, I have this model, it encompasses all the stories humankind has ever told, it's true about all of them. That's potentially very appealing. But even as Campbell was starting to make his move from being known in academic circles to broader ones, schools of literary theory and cultural studies and approaches to history were more becoming about perspective and limited knowledge. And this is where you get, among other things, everything from some of the post-Marxist historical theories that focus on actions of groups of people as a whole without necessarily assuming that those actions must lead toward a Marxist end of history, to certain, either depending on the person, appealing, disgusting, or just simply incoherent theories like the deconstructive school of literary criticism with Jacques Derrida, to a whole lot of much more kind of composite theories in which, among other things, you can, I don't know how much this is happening in high academia. It's been too long since I was there. I used to breathe that rarefied air. But of thinking that, basically you can look at a work from a particular lens and see what you can get out of that, but that using a tool set or applying a perspective or a model shouldn't even rhetorically be phrased as this is what the work means, but a presentation of what you can get out of something that then will be judged again subjectively in terms of where people find that useful or relevant to other approaches to it. Not the rejection of knowledge or truth, despite the fact that there have been a few people who've said that knowledge was impossible, and there have been many more people who reacted against kind of more subjective theories of knowledge with saying that it's all about the idea that knowledge is impossible, but more that no individual can completely contain the absolute truth about anything except perhaps their own experience, and that only in terms of the whole of their experience and not any limited set of words they have to say about it. So perfect knowledge is impossible, but improved knowledge is always possible, and part of improving knowledge involves listening to voices who are from groups that haven't been listened to so much. Another tangent of mine.
Oh, that's fine. Tangent away.
I can lecture on forever, and as you can see at times like this, I miss the opportunity to hold a classroom captive and just talk at them for an hour or a couple of hours. There are great advantages and considerable disadvantages to teaching online. lack of that classroom environment is, I would say, the biggest difference. That's where most of the disadvantages and most of the advantages come from. That students aren't pinned to their seats, but on the other hand, that I don't get to, well, indulge myself in rambling lectures, but also I don't get to see everyone's expressions and, kind of suss out how they're doing with the material at least once a week.
Well, here, maybe this will make the experience a little more believable. Is this going to be on the test?
Yes, the collegiate version of Are We There Yet? Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you handle that. No, all of that about the imperfect knowledge you were talking about. It just began to. I was having a discussion with someone the other day, and I had to stop them at some point and tell them, listen, you're never going to know the truth of anything. And if you keep this up, you will fall into a solipsistic black hole, and I'll have to slap you until you come out of it. And as I'm doing it, I'm going, why are you hitting yourself? No, he eventually saw my point without violence, so it was good.
Yes, avoiding violence is usually desirable and often the better way to make a rhetorical point.
Friends don't let friends think that they're the only thing that exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important that we watch out for each other like that.
Well, and actually, I think that's an interesting entree to the way that the internet and access to huge amounts of information, but also the incredible ease with which we can close ourselves up with only people who agree with us in little echo chambers online has an ongoing and as yet, I think, far from perfectly understood effect on humanity. I think it's easier than ever to find new perspectives, but it's also very easy to avoid having to deal with any of them.
Fair enough.
And on the plus side, I think that we are less than ever, I really think, as a whole, as a society in the United States and throughout the portion of humanity who has access to that kind of shared pool of information and to some degree of education, starting with literacy, and that itself is far from given for billions of people. But I think that we are moving out of the era in which any kind of single big authority can come along and sway an entire nation easily. I mean, I'm not saying that this isn't going to happen anymore, but I think we are slowly leaving the point at which, maybe part of the price of this will be more instances in which you see thousands, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people all get caught up in something together. I think without making any overbroad assumptions about world politics, that you can see the way that, especially when there's desperation, people get swept up into any sort of stability whatsoever. But that when people's basic needs are relatively met, the sources of information out there are such that I think that you'd be hard-pressed to find people who completely trust the government or the news or other or or unless they actually have it as a specific article of faith, and I mean that in a sense that isn't limited to organized religion, that who are willing to place all of their eggs in one basket when it comes to how they understand the world. That people, say for example, people of faith can be can disagree with faith leaders, think that leaders of their religion have made mistakes without it being the supposedly completely shattering event that people, both proponents and opponents of organized religion, have said that it would be. Wow, I've really gotten far away from games.
It happens. Um, well, on the subject of information on the internet, and of course a little bit of skepticism and mistrust in large entities and large organizations is probably a good thing. Yet, as we turn our attention towards gaming companies, to bring this back around full
Right.
circle, force it to work in there.
Thank you, Victor. Yes.
Anytime. As people come back around to, say, for example, your large, massively multiplayer online games, people come back to communities that are formed in-game. And I mean real communities, not all those 12-year-old guys who banged my mom on Xbox Live. Pardon me, I'm bad. My dad dies, and she just goes out with every 12-year-old she can find, apparently. But the community of gamers that get established online, sometimes people begin taking things in game environment incredibly seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the disinformation effect. You get a misinformation effect about in-game events. Don't even get people started on the difference between the Alliance and the Horde in World of Warcraft. I mean, personally, I like both of them. I like playing both of them, but there are people out there who get very caught up in things and begin to see the corporate culture and politics in the company not actually the thing that affects the game, that they begin seeing, instead of that being a case of, hey, these developers are schmucks, it's now, well, the players over here are schmucks. And that's why the game sucks. So I think sometimes there's a bit of mislaid blame.
I think so. And we've certainly seen some of the worst kinds of excitability in gaming communities over things like the massive trolling of Anita Sarkeesian for daring to do a series of videos about things that she thought were problematically sexist in video games. How dare she share her thoughts? And and some of the other things, there's certainly the potential for a certain kind of narrow tribalism that can emerge over things that we might generally describe as fictional, and it's not as if anyone thinks that these things are real in the can't tell fiction from reality sense. It's that they're video games and things within games that matter so much to people that they will form deep enmity with groups of people because they play a different faction in a video game. And we see this elsewhere, where people, will take sides over things like which characters in a series are the ones that should romantically hook up, and they will have vicious flame wars online over just how horribly wrong and inconceivably unacceptable it is that other people think differently. So, I certainly shouldn't get utopian about the influence digital media has on our lives.
Well, that bit about people hooking up in series, I thought the beginning of this season's Doctor Who was absolutely great. There was a line in it, the new, older Scottish doctor tells his young female companion, "I'm not your boyfriend."
Right.
Which is what all of the girls were doing. They were fixating on the younger Matt Smith doctor, the previous actor, and it was absolutely amazing to see that, because in the previous episode, there had been this bit about how many lives the Doctor gets, and in the episode prior to the season premiere, there was this bit in there about he receives ideally a limitless number, or at least 13 more lives, and there's this whole line, "We're breaking some serious science, never tell me the rules." And you can tell the writer is poking at the fans, poking at the obsessive fans. Okay, first of all, he's not your boyfriend, and second of all, he lives as many times as we say he does, because he's a character in a TV show. It's
Right. Yes. The from the fans who, based on what had been said long ago, in terms of how many times Gallifreyans, that's the term they don't even use in the new series. How many times they can be regenerated to, yeah. Well, and, this is something to remember as writers, and to remember in terms of both sides of it. Here's, to try and wrap up, on a writing relevant note, now that you at least brought us back to games and science fiction here. As a writer, what you put into the scripts or the novels, etc., and as it gets presented, especially when you're talking about writing that gets mediated through someone else's production of it, is what the story and the world are, and people are entitled to and will have different interpretations of it, but their interpretations do not obligate you to comply with their expectations. In fact, one of the good rules of writing is that while you generally need to satisfy some of the audience's desires and expectations, if you try to give them everything they want, you're going to dissatisfy them. At best, you leave them bored because there's nothing left that they don't have that they want out of it. That said, when writers do everything they can to basically punish their audience and the audiences keep coming back, George R. R. Martin, I really can't explain that beyond some deep-rooted masochistic tendency in the audience members themselves. But, I kind of knew too much about how Game of Thrones was going to go before I got into the movies, the TV series or the books. So when things started going awry, I was like, it's going to get worse. I'll move on to something else. There are plenty of people who are into this. They can be into it. There are some good performances in the HBO series, I have to say. Some very good acting. And maybe if I'd kept up with it, I would be right there going, hurt me more, George. But,
he does love to disappoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, and so neither fans can get terrifyingly full of themselves, and authors can also get really full of themselves, and maybe sometimes it's part of what carries them once they are completely established icons. But for the rest of us, both fans who don't want to become obsessives and writers who are hoping to make some success or impact without already being famous, a little humility is usually warranted. So, I'm going to call that a good point to end this, at least the recorded portion here. So I'm stopping the broadcast.